Hi, everybody. This is Colleen with Speaking of Spirits, and today I've got my sidekick, Katie.
Hi.
And Tim and Mark are out doing stuff, so we decided we went ahead without them.
It's Girls' Day.
Girls' Day, and we are going to talk about Blackfoot South.
Yes.
And if you don't know Blackfoot South, it is the state. Is it like a mental hospital?
Yeah, so it's one of, I believe, 3 now in Idaho. Ours is for the southeastern region, and ours has a lot of different parts to it. So it is like an inpatient mental health facility. They do geriatric care. They do minors who are suicidal, and then they do criminally insane, which Idaho doesn't really do criminally insane, but people that are not yet deemed fit for trial wait there and undergo treatment until they're ready to go. Lori Vallow was there.
Oh.
Yes.
So we don't have, when you said we don't have the criminally insane, so that's
right.
You can't, in Idaho, you can't claim insanity to get out of a criminal charge. Like, So, I mean, like murder, you can't claim insanity. That doesn't exist in Idaho. They said, nope.
Yep.
So that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So they have to go to a mental hospital?
Yep. They deem you incompetent to undergo trial, and you will undergo treatment. And some people, you might undergo treatment for the rest of your life and never go to trial, but you'll never be out free.
Oh, that's nuts. That's nuts.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So it is, there are individuals in there who are dangerous, some because they are criminal, and some just have mental illnesses that don't respond to treatment. And then you just have geriatric care and things like that. So, it's an interesting place.
So what's the history? When was it built?
So, we did a little bit of history, by the way, on our Idaho haunts, because this is my favorite Idaho haunt in Idaho. So it was built in 1886, 4 years before Idaho was granted statehood. And it actually was, at that time, the insane asylum was for criminals only. So they had criminals from Oregon shipped down. Ours was the first state hospital, which is really cool. The sad thing is that other than criminally insane, families could just drop family members off at the hospital and roll out. So you had people that sometimes you had women that their families didn't want to care for them. They weren't married. They were not ladylike, if you know what I mean. They had their own opinions. So they got shipped off to the hospital, which is pretty sad.
That is sad.
Yeah. So anyway, it was the first one. And the first building actually burnt down in a fire in 1889. And it was just the one building at that time. And there were 47 males and 20 female patients at the time. Early accounts said 7 patients, so 5 men and 2 women, were missing afterwards, with 2 bodies found in the ruins. But later they said that nobody was killed in the fire. But there's never a record either way.
How many?
7 total that were disappeared in the fire. So who knows if they escaped. They said 2 bodies were found in the ruins, which is unfortunate too, though, because that could have been anyone. It could have been a worker. It could have been, an inmate, as they were called at the time. But also, the conditions were so bad, it could have been a body of somebody that had already died. Half the times they just left them.
That's terrible.
Yeah. So the treatment was not great at the time. Even now, there's an account of a psychiatric nursing student a couple of years back that did their clinics over there. And it's just, it's hard. The conditions aren't great because the patients are dangerous to themselves and others. Mm-hmm. So it's essentially looks like a jail inside, if you've ever been in there. But anyway, I wanted to share a really cool story about a woman named Maggie Hardy, or Margaret Hardy. And I love her. She's crazy, but I love her. So her first, Latah County, which I don't even know where that is, is that Up by,
I don't know. Let me
east
look.
of Boise?
Who? What is it called?
Latah County. Where is it?
Oh, yeah, right there.
Yeah.
Latah.
I am not.
I will find out for us and our guests.
Yes, I'm not originally from Idaho, so I don't know all the counties.
Neither am I, so it's really hard for me to.
Oh.
It's like.
Is that by Boise then? It took us over there.
Located in the north central region of Idaho. So Moscow.
Oh,
the county seat is Moscow.
Okay,
and not Russia. Moscow, Idaho. For those of you who are not from Idaho,
frozen just like Russia, though.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where the first murder case was. Back in 1895 is when that murder case showed up in the papers, and Maggie Hardy. They called her Old Woman Hardy. And somebody called her a black-hearted old hag by the newspaper, would soon enough be the only woman in the Idaho State Penitentiary, which is the old prison.
In Boise.
So that's where she started out. She had an infamous past. She lived in Utah, Colorado, Oregon, and then moved to Idaho. She was known for prostitutions, theft, running bordellos.
Oh, girl,
yes,
had it going on.
Yes, she was a wild woman, which I love. However, she got a little crazy. So she was charged with despoiling the golden hair of a 7-year-old girl by cutting it off, and eventually fell into morphine addiction.
So wait a minute. Despoiling the hair?
Yes. Yes.
That's a criminal charge, cutting off the hair. I guess that's assault.
It's assault now. Yeah. Yep.
Oh
and back then, the length of your hair as a woman determined how pure you were.
Oh, well, y'all.
Colleen, she's getting crazy over there.
Oh, boy. Her hair is really long, by the way.
I'm so pure. I'm so innocent. I've never, ever done anything. Pure as a virgin. Yeah. So that was her first in Aspen. So she was eventually sent to an institution, first in Oregon. And they called her, they said she's cured. They released her. And here's where it gets kind of crazy. So she went back to an asylum after a suicide attempt. Then she moved to Moscow.
So she was addicted to morphine, though, when she went in.
Yep. So she was sent to the asylum due to morphine addiction.
Well, now, y'all know that morphine was like in everything back then, right? So cough syrup was morphine. Excuse me. They have, like, I found all these little bottles in Pennsylvania where I lived.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, like on the farm, and little bottles, and they're morphine. If you look up the history, like they have imprinted on the glass the cure-alls and stuff. It was all morphine. Like, how cool is that? Everybody was addicted to morphine. Yes,
it really was a wild time.
It was.
And that's the thing, is it was a cure-all. You just, anything happened, you just popped it. And low-key, everyone was addicted to morphine. Everyone was.
I'm telling you.
So
what a time to be alive.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, is like a lot of the people in even Blackfoot South at the beginning were morphine addicts, which society set them up to be. They weren't criminal on purpose. They were addicts. That's where her first asylum visit happened. And then she attempted suicide, probably because of her addictions. Anyway, then she moved to Moscow. She kept on her criminal ways, and she had a wicked temper, everyone said. And she, oh boy. So then they moved to Lewiston, they rented out their house. There was a prostitute who was also a colored woman, which was kind of scandalous at the time, and her toddler named Henrietta. So essentially, her husband and the prostitute had a little, affair, because that's how it goes when you invite a prostitute into your house. And Maggie was pissed. And so she plotted her revenge. She pretended to reconcile with her husband. She talked Harvey into helping her adopt the 2-year-old of the prostitute, Henrietta. And her mom didn't consent at first, but they essentially blackmailed her and said, if you don't let us adopt the child, you won't be able to stay here. And as a colored prostitute, in Idaho. Where is she going to stay?
That's craziness.
Yeah, so it gets worse. So they adopt this child, and within days, Maggie let everyone know, because she's drunk and has a temper and can't keep a secret, that she planned to poison Henrietta, then kill the mom, the prostitute, and her husband, and then kill herself. Nobody intervened. I don't know if they just thought it was her temper and she was just talking shit, because that's what she did. But on Sunday, February 10th of 1895, Maggie prepared a large dose of morphine for herself, meaning to kill herself. And then she put it on the counter along with a glass of carbolic acid. That wasn't uncommon for people to commit suicide that way. They would take the morphine to numb it, and then they'd take the carbolic acid, which would eat away the mouth, esophagus, and the lungs.
Oh God. I mean, so that's kind of like what spies do, right? Is they take what do they take? It's like the pills that they'll have on them. Mm-hmm. So if they get caught,
it's like a quick.
It's
pain. I wonder, is that what it is?
I don't know, but it's acid? like death is really quick within just a couple of minutes, but it just
I wonder if that's what it is.
Can't imagine. That's painful.
Yeah. Oh, it's horrible. And that's why
I don't think there's enough morphine in the world to numb it all.
Because that would all happen before you die.
Right.
As a side, It's not like.
Oh.
Yeah. Times were rough. So that's what she said she was preparing it for. She said she had that prepared so she could kill herself. Gosh, though, she got distracted by something. And at that time, tragically, Henrietta had found and swallowed the morphine and then tipped over the acid. And it did kill her because it ate away her face and other details. So, yeah. And of course, nobody believed Maggie's story because she previously had said and told everyone that she was planning on killing the child. And while waiting trial, she suddenly went crazy. Just wild all of a sudden. She was insane. And the sheriff thought she was just doing it for the insanity plea. But she was charged with second-degree murder. And they never did an autopsy on the child, even though she was horribly disfigured when they found the body. So they were saying they couldn't prove it was poison. Yeah, but she did go to prison. That's when she ended up in the Idaho State Penitentiary. They called her Mad Margaret.
So what year was this?
This was...
Does it say?
That same year, 1895.
Well, yeah. There was no such thing as forensics really back then.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, she was in the penitentiary. She tried to commit suicide several times. She tried to eat glass, but they don't think that actually happened. So because she kept trying to commit suicide, that's when they moved her in July when the Blackfoot South was first built. So they sent her there to evaluate her. But once she got there, the doctor deemed her entirely sane.
Do you think she was faking it?
Oh, 100%. Wait for this. So, Warden John Campbell, though, was determined to break her. He was like, no, she says she's acting entirely sane, but it's all a joke, or she's faking it. So does that mean she's actually insane and she can manipulate and she's narcissistic? So they thought that if they put her in a room, a tight little windowless cell for Maggie, keeping her in isolation, she would get better. She got worse. She got crazier. So they shipped her off to the insane asylum again because they had sent her back to the hospital because they sent her back to the prison because the hospital deemed her sane. But keeping her in a tiny room literally drove her insane. So what happened? Yeah. So what happened after that is not entirely certain. She was listed on the Blackfoot Asylum information card. It says delusions of grandeur and persecution, abnormally irritable. Oddly, the note also included the word
abnormally irritable.
Yeah, abnormally irritable.
That's me.
If you're like any woman, any Irish woman. Yes. So the note declared her dead. So everyone thought she was dead. But in 1906, so this was 10 years later, an issue of the Pendleton Eastern Oregonian paper reported that her incinerated remains were discovered in the rubble of a burned residence where she had been working as a housekeeper.
Really?
When or why she was released from the asylum, or if she actually was, is lost to history. And you can see this isn't her state south, but this is because even though she was at the Blackfoot South Hospital, the penitentiary was still technically in charge of her. You can see her description of convict and her charges and everything still, which is cool. But I found another article, and then I couldn't find it again in my history, but it did talk about how there was a lot of talk around town how she escaped. And when she went to Oregon, everybody was super scared of her because she escaped from like this mental institution. And it sounds like
she is nuts.
Yeah.
And she's criminally insane.
Yeah. And she was absolutely evil. I mean, she killed a toddler because she was jealous of her mother having an affair with her husband. But why? I mean, obviously Blackfoot South tried to cover it up because they noted her dead, but there's...
So do you think so there was a fire there?
Yes.
At the the state mental hospital.
Yes, the first year there was a fire. At that time, I think it was just 1 or 2 buildings. Yep, that completely destroyed it.
So how many buildings are there?
So now there's, I believe, 7, and I think they're building a new one. So I actually have a map of it if I can find it.
So you have people who were incinerated in the fire, obviously, because they did find at least 2 bodies.
Yes, which again, were those bodies already dead? Because I mean, for example,
I'm sure they have a morgue there, or a place. I mean, because people die in that big a hospital.
Yeah. So as far as I understand, no, they do it just the way the hospital does now, which they keep them in the bed until the coroner can pick them up and take them to the funeral home. But back then, they would just wrap him in a sheet and bury him out back.
Oh, that's right. There's a cemetery.
They built a new cemetery to try to commemorate the people that had perished there. There was hardly any death records at the time. So, I mean, it really is like, think about all the anguish, all the people that died and nobody knew, a lot of transient people abandoned by their families because it was a social wrong to have a family member that was ill or mentally handicapped.
Yeah, you just didn't talk about them. They didn't exist anymore. You kind of have wiped them from your memory. Mm-hmm. That's terrible. Mm-hmm. That's just terrible.
Yeah, it's got a dark history. And they used to, there's an account online you can read about a nurse in the 60s. They would chain people to the walls. And this is the 60s. This isn't that long ago. Chain people to the walls.
That's terrible.
Punish them by not giving them food. I mean, and there's, when I worked dispatch, you would get some calls and to this day, there's still, very, very mentally ill patients, and the quality of care I just don't think they have the trained staff. But there's also some spooky ghost stories. There's a ghost phone in the Yes.
Oh, wait, now I have heard this from somebody who worked there.
Yes, there is. So when I worked at dispatch for a short period of time.
Maybe it was from you.
Maybe it was.
Yes.
There's a ghost phone. And you will get phone calls from, the state hospital anyway, because the patients are allowed access to a phone. Sometimes they'll call and they're kind of paranoid and they'll be like, the nurse is drugging me. And so you just kind of talk to them until the nurse comes and says, hey, everything's okay. But there is a phone number to a room. And to this day, there's no phone in there. There's no phone jack. This room isn't even used anymore, but you'll still get phone calls from that room. And it's just white noise on the other end. Yeah, it's creepy.
That is spooky.
Isn't that eerie?
So how many patients does Blackfoot South hold?
They hold 100. Yes. They have 60. I think they have like 10 or 12 like juvenile beds, 30 adult beds. And then I think total it's like 100. It's not very large, which is very unfortunate because there's a really high need for it. But unless you've attempted to commit suicide, they can't admit you because they don't have room.
Considering how many state hospitals do we have in Idaho?
3. We have
3. So let's say at the outmost we have 600 beds.
if that.
That's not enough.
No, it's not. It's
I
a
mean,
large
Idaho is
issue.
a pretty small state. For those of you who have pretty small state. For those of you who have never been here, Idaho, like the whole state population, just to give you an idea, the city of Sacramento, not the county, but the city of Sacramento, I think is 4 times bigger than the state of Idaho with population. We don't have a big population, but we still have need. And
we have a high need because we deal with a lot of drugs. We deal with a lot of poverty.
Yeah. We have a need for state hospitals and we have a need for prisons because they let everybody out here on what they call a rider. A rider is where somebody, they don't have space for them in prison or in jail. So they basically give you a slap on the hand and say, be a good person and go do whatever classes we tell you to do. And then if you don't do them, we'll send you to prison. But they don't. And so we have really violent offenders here and pedophiles and everything else. And they never do any time because all of our judges and our DAs will let them go on a rider. And it's because we don't have any space.
And also terrible. Money. It costs so much more to go through charging people and housing people.
Yeah. And housing them and feeding them. And we don't, if we had, and I'm not an advocate for having a whole lot of prisons, but there are violent offenders and people who harm children. That's just me, but I'm just saying these people we need places.
We need more.
And mental health, we all saw it with COVID. Mental health issues skyrocketed because they told us to not see anybody. Well, humans need connection. You need the connection to your family or your friends. And I mean, I'm a loner, but I still need the connection with those few friends that I maintain, my tight circle. If you don't have that connection, your mental health just plummets.
And we saw that a lot too, even with places like this, not being, I hate the term locked up, but that's what it feels like. They don't really have a lot of freedoms or a lot of things to do. And then not having visitors on top of that, there were a lot of deaths in skilled nursing and geriatric mental health facilities because of that. And here's the information. They do have 90 adult psych beds, 16 adolescent beds, and 29 skilled nursing, which is like geriatric patients. And that's
not very much.
No, and no memory care here, hardly. So people that need memory care often end up in a high, an area like this that's like high security when it's not necessary, but there's nowhere else.
Yeah, we have a few places in Pocatello. Memory care is say grandma has dementia or something like that. Dementia patients usually cannot be put into a senior facility, a normal senior facility, because they'll leave and then they're found wandering the streets. And so they need to be in a locked facility, but they still are able to wander the halls and they have, and something like this, they're probably locked in their rooms a lot. That's terrible.
They are. Yep. And it really is. It's, I have a friend, who was a CNA there for a very long time. And she says it's essentially glorified prison because there's so many safety concerns. We had a guy come into the hospital from there. He had swallowed like a stapler and a letter opener and like a light bulb, like all of these things. And it's like, I mean, what do you do? But it's...
So the paranormal side of Blackfoot South, then you think is connected to the fires?
Definitely the fires.
And then the loss of the people who live there.
And I just think that's the terrible treatment because most of the time in those opening, I think the first 4 or 5 years, like I said, people would just abandon their family members. So you're miserable in life and you're going to be miserable in death. Nobody was there to bury you. They rolled him in a sheet. I mean, that was
That's
it. Like
terrible.
It is terrible.
And then, what you were talking about is the late 1800s, even early 1900s, right? When you had a family member who was placed there, probably just because she was an independent gal and she didn't conform.
She was
hysterical. They had to live their whole life in a blocked facility without experiencing any freedom again because they didn't conform. Now society revels in nonconformists. I mean, that's like, woohoo, everybody's a nonconformist now, which is in a sense conforming, but still, it's what a terrible thing to have to experience. So no doubt there's activity there. So Tim was saying that he had experiences in the cemetery and like a light or something, or people have experienced up there.
Yeah.
Now, is that cemetery open to walk around?
Yes. I was just going to say, I'd love to go and see if anybody ever did a headstone for, because what they did is they didn't really obviously have bodies, but they raised money for headstones for all of the records of people that had died there that they could find. And I'd love to see if Maggie Hardy is there, because they claimed that she died. I don't think she died there. I think she dipped. And I think she did die in a house fire in Oregon, or maybe ran away, and who knows where she went. But I kind of wonder if somebody ever did anything for her there.
Wow.
Even though she's kind of an evil person. She went a little crazy.
Yeah. I mean, you don't, she's pretty evil. But it'd be interesting to see. Yeah, we should go. I'm not a big fan of going to cemeteries, because I don't think a lot of people will hang around in a cemetery, but a place like that where they're lost. Yeah. So many people, the souls are lost already, and they don't have a connection with their family. And those instances,
only place that they can hang around.
Right. Where else are you going to go? So I've run into a few nurses that have worked at Blackfoot South, and they've had experiences, and they've told me stories, and
Ghost phone. Ghost phone.
Wow. Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing the story, Katie. That's nuts.
Pretty interesting, huh?
Have you worked at Blackfoot South? Do you know anybody who's been there and they've had experiences? We would like to know. Yeah. Hit us up on Pocatello Paranormal Facebook, on our Pocatello Paranormal Research on Facebook, and let us know
all your stories. Gosh. We'd love to share them and hear them.
Or do you want to be on our podcast and let us know? We'll do that too. Yep.
Listener tales.
Yes, listener tales, definitely. Well, thanks. Do you have anything else? Do you think that was it?
State hospital, we could go on. I think this might need to be a running series, because there really is so much.
Well, we can do more.
There's so much. So
we can do more, definitely.
Yeah, if you want to hear more about State Hospital,
let us know. All right, everybody. This is Colleen with Speaking of Spirits, and we'll catch you next time.